I'll never forget that night. It still haunts me, every damn detail, every shadow that moves. I don't know if I was just unlucky, or if some places in this world are cursed. Either way, I've been too scared to sleep in a motel since. It started innocently enough. I was on a cross-country road trip, just me and the open road, when I decided to stop for the night. The usual. A motel. Nothing fancy, just a place to crash, and then I'd hit the road again by morning. I was near a small, forgotten town, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, when I spotted it, a place called the Pine Grove Motel. At first glance, it looked like any other rundown motel. The flickering neon sign, the gravel parking lot, and the old, weather-beaten building. I didn't think twice. I just needed a bed and a shower. I pulled into the parking lot around 1 a.m., tired from hours of driving. It was late, but there was a light on in the front office. I walked in, and the air inside was stale, like it hadn't been aired out in years. The desk clerk, an older man with thin white hair and a haggard face, looked up from the magazine he was reading. His eyes were dark, almost sunken in, like he hadn't slept in days. "You need a room?" he asked, his voice raspy. "Yeah, just for the night," I replied, trying to keep things simple. He stood up slowly, glancing over my shoulder out the window, as if he were checking something. "Room 7, he said abruptly. "That'll be $45. I paid in cash, and he handed me a key with a worn-out tag that had a number 7 scratched into it. His eyes locked onto mine for a moment too long before he slowly turned and pointed down the hallway. "It's the last one. You'll be fine." I didn't know why, but something about the way he said "you'll be fine" made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. But, I was tired, and I brushed it off as nothing. I thanked him and turned down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows on the cracked walls. The further I walked, the more I felt like I was being watched, but when I glanced around, there was no one there. When I reached room 7, I took a deep breath and slid the key into the lock. It creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room with cheap furniture, just what I had expected. I set my bag down and immediately went to the bathroom to wash up. That's when I noticed something strange. The mirror above the sink was fogged up, but it wasn't from steam. No, it was as if someone had just wiped it down. There were faint smudges in the shape of handprints, as if someone had been pressing their hands against it, maybe even just moments before I stepped in. I froze. I didn't touch the mirror when I came in, and the only person who'd been in the room before me was the old man at the front desk. I looked around, half expecting someone to be standing behind me. But, there was no one. Just the sound of the old, creaking motel settling in the night. I quickly shrugged it off, told myself it was nothing, and decided to get some sleep. But sleep didn't come easy that night. Something about the place, something felt wrong. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the thin motel sheets clinging to my body in the stale, musty air. My mind kept wandering back to that damn mirror. The handprints, they didn't make sense. The rational part of me told myself I was just overtired, that I was imagining things. But that nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. Around 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by a noise. At first, I thought it was just the wind or the sound of the building shifting in the night, but no, it was something more. Faint, distant whispering. It was so quiet I could barely make it out, but I could hear it, words, like a conversation, muffled behind the walls. The whispers bounced off the plaster, creeping into my ears, then retreating, only to return again, this time louder. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no one else around. I knew that, this was a dead-end town. The parking lot outside was practically empty when I arrived. It was just me, alone in that room. The whispering shouldn't have been there. I stood up and walked toward the wall where the sound seemed to be coming from. The whispers were clearer now, almost like murmurs, like people trying to keep their voices down. They grew louder, and I could swear I heard a name, Dylan. It was faint, but I could have sworn I heard it clearly. Dylan, it whispered again, but this time it sounded like it came from right behind me. I spun around, my breath caught in my throat, but there was no one. The room was still. Silent. I moved toward the window, hoping the cool night air would calm me down. I looked out into the parking lot, it was empty. A few cars scattered here and there, but nothing moved. I felt like I was losing my mind. The whispers hadn't stopped, though. They were getting closer, sharper. I could hear what sounded like footsteps now, walking slowly along the hallway outside my door. I crept toward the door, my hand hovering over the handle, my entire body on edge. Every instinct screamed at me not to open it, but I couldn't resist. I slowly turned the knob and cracked the door open. The hallway was dark, just a stretch of dim light flickering above. No one was in sight. But then, I saw it, a figure at the far end of the hall, standing just outside the shadows. A tall, gaunt man with a weathered face, his hands at his sides, his back straight as if he were waiting. I couldn't make out his features, but I could see his silhouette against the flickering light. I opened the door just a bit wider, my heart thudding in my chest. The figure didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me, like he was waiting for me to make the next move. The whispers stopped, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then, without warning, the figure stepped into the light. His face was pale, almost sickly, his eyes wide and vacant, like he had seen something so horrifying that it had shattered his mind. His lips curled into a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. But it wasn't a normal smile, it was something unsettling, something wrong. "Room 7, he muttered, his voice raspy, like gravel scraping against metal. "You shouldn't have come." His words sent a cold shiver down my spine. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands trembling as I backed away from it. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what just happened. Who was that? And why was he talking about my room? I couldn't stay here. I needed to leave, but something kept me frozen in place. I glanced at the window, and for a split second, I thought I saw someone standing just outside, staring in at me. The whispering started again. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the walls, it was coming from inside the room. I had to get out. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was here was waiting for me to make a move, to open that door just one more time. And when I did, I realized, it wasn't just the man at the end of the hallway who was watching. I stayed frozen in place for what felt like hours. My body was stiff, heart hammering against my chest as I pressed my back to the door, holding my breath. The whispers were louder now, clearer, and they were coming from inside the room. But not from the walls, no, they were coming from the dark corners of the room itself, like something was hiding there, waiting for me to look. I was sure I heard my name again. Dylan, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to leave, but the thought of opening that door again, of stepping out into the unknown hallway where that strange figure still lingered, filled me with dread. I glanced out the window, hoping for some kind of escape, but the parking lot was still empty. No one was around, and yet, I had never felt more surrounded. I grabbed my keys, stuffed them in my pocket, and rushed to the door. I couldn't stand being in there a second longer. I turned the handle, but the door wouldn't budge. It was locked. It hadn't been locked before. I'd only closed it behind me when I came in. Now, it felt like something was holding it shut from the other side. I twisted the handle again, desperate. It didn't move. Then I heard it, the faintest sound, like nails scraping against the wood. I stepped back, holding my breath. Was someone on the other side, pressing against the door? Or was it just my mind playing tricks on me? Another noise. This time, louder. The scraping turned into tapping, quick, sharp taps, like fingers drumming on the door. I could feel the vibration under my hand. But who the hell was out there? I turned and rushed to the window, trying to pry it open. But the frame was old, stuck. I banged on the glass, yelling out, hoping someone might hear me. But there was no sound outside, no sign of life. The wind picked up, rattling the loose shutters, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. The whispers grew louder now, almost deafening, and they sounded so close, like they were right behind me. I spun around, my pulse pounding in my ears. The room was dark, the shadows deepening, and it felt like the walls themselves were closing in on me. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shadow. A figure in the corner of the room, just standing there, watching me. I froze. It was tall, unnaturally tall, with a long, distorted figure that didn't belong in the room. I couldn't make out its face, just a blurred mass of blackness, but I could feel its eyes on me, cold, empty, and hungry. "Leave now," the voice from the corner whispered, a deep, guttural sound that made my skin crawl. The door. The door was still locked. There was no way out. I turned, panic taking over. I could hear the figure shifting in the shadows, its limbs creaking like an old wooden floor. I reached for the door handle again, but it still wouldn't open. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. And then, they went out entirely, plunging the room into total darkness. I was suffocating. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in on me, the air thick and heavy. I stumbled around the room, my hands outstretched, trying to find anything that would help me escape. Then, I heard it again. The tapping. But this time, it was coming from inside the room, from behind me. I spun around just in time to see a figure step forward from the shadows, right into the sliver of light coming from under the door. It was a man. But not any man I recognized. He had the same hollow, sunken eyes as the clerk at the front desk, only his face was twisted with something worse, something ancient and far more sinister. He smiled at me, and the hairs on my neck stood up again. "You shouldn't have stayed here, Dylan. You should have left when you had the chance." I was frozen. My body was shaking uncontrollably, and I couldn't look away. He stepped closer, his footfalls soft on the carpet, and I could feel the weight of his gaze as if he was reading my soul. He raised one hand, pale and trembling, and I thought, no, I knew, he was about to reach out and touch me. The door behind me rattled, shaking on its hinges. I turned, and with a surge of adrenaline, I yanked the handle again. This time, it opened. I don't know how or why, but the door flew open with a crash. Without thinking, I bolted out into the hallway, not daring to look back. The figure's voice echoed in the darkness behind me. "It's too late for you." I ran down the hall, the sound of my footsteps loud against the silence, and I didn't stop until I reached the front door. The air outside was cold, but I didn't care. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. But even as I pulled out of that motel parking lot, the image of that figure stayed burned in my mind. I didn't know what it was, what I had just encountered, but I knew, it wasn't the last time it would come for me. I drove all the way through the night, never stopping, my eyes glued to the road ahead. But somewhere, deep down, I knew the worst was yet to come. I don't know why I thought I could outrun it. After I left the Pine Grove Motel, I tried to forget about it all, the whispers, the shadowy figures, the strange man who had been waiting for me. I told myself it was a bad dream, a product of too many hours on the road and not enough sleep. But the feeling stayed with me, gnawing at the edges of my mind, a constant reminder that something was wrong. For the next few weeks, I didn't dare go near that part of the country again. I stuck to the highways, avoiding the smaller towns. I had no choice. Something about that place, about room 7, felt like it was always waiting for me, like it was pulling at the edges of my mind, beckoning me back. But a few weeks later, the nightmares started. They began innocently enough. I would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, feeling the same suffocating presence from the motel room. The figure. The whispers. And in every dream, the same thing, the man with hollow eyes was always there, watching me from the shadows, waiting for me to make a mistake. But the dreams didn't stop there. They began to feel more real. More vivid. More alive. One night, I woke up with a start. My breath came in sharp gasps, and I was certain I had heard something that didn't belong. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text message from an unknown number, room 7. "We're waiting." I froze. My heart stopped in my chest. I didn't know how they had my number, but I knew who it was from. The motel. The figure. The whispers. I didn't want to go back. I couldn't go back. But the thought of that place, of what was waiting for me, was too much to ignore. The message was clear. I had no choice. The next morning, I found myself driving back toward that damn motel. It felt like I was being dragged along, unable to turn away. I tried to ignore the unease building in my chest, but the closer I got, the worse it became. When I finally turned onto the gravel road leading to the Pine Grove Motel, everything looked exactly as it had before. The same flickering neon sign. The same empty parking lot. The same dark, oppressive feeling hanging over the place like a storm cloud. I pulled into the lot, my hands gripping the wheel, my heart pounding in my ears. The front office light was on again, and I didn't know if I was relieved or terrified. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come, and stepped out of the car. The old man was behind the desk again when I walked in. He didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, he looked almost pleased. "You came back," he said, his voice gravelly, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "Room 7's ready for you." I didn't say anything. I just handed him the cash, and he handed me the same old key. The one with the number 7 scratched on it. I turned away, feeling the weight of his gaze on my back as I walked down the same hallway. The same hallway that had felt so cold, so empty before. But now, it felt alive. The walls seemed to hum with something dark, something that watched me, waited for me. When I reached room 7, I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about what could happen if I stepped inside. I just shoved the key in the lock and opened the door. The room was just as it had been. Nothing had changed. The same cheap furniture. The same cracked walls. The same stale air that made me feel like I was suffocating. But there was something else now. Something I hadn't expected. The figure. The tall, gaunt man with the hollow eyes. He was standing in the corner of the room, his back to me, as if he had been waiting for me to return. "You came back," he whispered, his voice low and empty, the same voice I had heard in my nightmares. "You shouldn't have." I stepped backward, my mind racing, but I couldn't look away. I felt like I was being pulled toward him, like something was controlling my movements. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. "You can't leave now," the figure continued, his lips curling into that same unsettling smile. "Not until it's finished." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The room was closing in on me, the shadows shifting and moving like they had a life of their own. I felt a presence behind me, something moving, just out of sight, always just out of reach. And then, as if the room itself had been waiting for this moment, the lights flickered once more, plunging everything into darkness. I couldn't see him, but I could feel his presence growing stronger, pressing in from all sides. The whispers started again, louder than ever, rushing through my mind, telling me things I couldn't understand, things that made my blood run cold. And then, from the darkness, the figure spoke one last time, "You're already here. There's nowhere left to run." I didn't know what was happening or why. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to make it out of that room. Not this time. And the worst part, I wasn't sure I wanted to. The room closed in on me like a vice, the air thick and suffocating. I could feel the walls pressing against me, the whispers curling around my mind, distorting my thoughts. They were saying things I couldn't understand, but they were relentless. The figure in the corner, his hollow eyes, that twisted smile, was moving closer, his form growing more defined in the dark. My heart was hammering in my chest. My hands trembled uncontrollably, but I couldn't look away from him. It was like he had me in some kind of trance. I didn't want to be here, I wanted to run, to scream, but I couldn't. He moved closer, his steps silent on the old carpet, his face never changing. The darkness around him seemed to ripple, shifting like a living thing. "You think you can escape?" His voice was low, almost amused. But there was a deep, unearthly coldness in it, something that made my skin crawl. I couldn't answer. I couldn't speak. All I could do was watch as he took one slow step forward, then another. Each one felt like an eternity. The air around me grew colder with each step, and the whispers became louder, filling my mind with images I couldn't escape. Flashing memories of things I hadn't experienced, faces that didn't belong, places that felt wrong. Then, with one final step, he was standing right in front of me. His face was inches from mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw something behind his eyes, something older, darker, that didn't belong in this world. "You should have left when you had the chance," he whispered. But this time, the words felt like a promise, not a warning. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. My legs were like lead, unable to move, paralyzed by the terror that surged through me. The room was so cold now, the air sharp like ice. I was trapped. There was no way out. And then, as if everything had been leading up to this moment, I felt a strange compulsion, something deep inside, like a voice that wasn't my own, telling me that I had one choice left. I turned my gaze away from the figure, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of escape. The walls, the corners, they felt alive now, like they were watching me, closing in. That's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, behind the figure, a door appeared. I hadn't seen it before. It was a narrow, wooden door, set into the wall, hidden in the shadows. I don't know how it got there, but I knew, I had to go through it. I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't sure if it was real or just another trick of the mind, but the door was there, and it felt like my only chance. I turned and made a break for it, my legs finally working again. I sprinted past the figure, hearing him laugh softly behind me. The sound echoed through the room, cold and hollow, like the laugh of someone who knew you were already lost. I reached the door and yanked it open. It was a small hallway beyond, darker than the room, and it smelled musty, like old wood and decay. Without thinking, I stepped inside, my breath ragged, my heart racing. The door slammed shut behind me, the sound loud in the silent darkness. I was trapped again. I turned to face the hallway, trying to steady my breathing, but it was no use. The walls were moving, shifting like they were alive. And the whispers, they were everywhere now, swirling around me, inside my head, filling my ears until I thought I might go mad. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to keep moving. The floor beneath me creaked with each step, the shadows stretching and flickering as if they were reaching for me. Every corner I turned led me deeper into the maze, but there was no end, no exit. It was just more dark hallways, more doors that led to nothing. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was lost in this nightmare, unable to escape. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw it. At the far end of the hall, there was another door. It looked like a way out, real, solid, and waiting for me. I didn't hesitate. I ran toward it, praying that it was the answer. But when I reached for the handle, I stopped. The door, it was familiar. It was room 7. The same room. I had come full circle. A voice, his voice, whispered in the darkness behind me, as cold and final as the grave, "It's too late for you. You never should have come back." I turned around, my chest tightening, and there he was again. The figure. Standing in the shadows, his face twisted into that awful grin. The hallway vanished behind me, and the room, the same room, was all that remained. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't an illusion. I was back in room 7. And this time, I knew there would be no escape. I stood there in the suffocating dark, my body shaking, my heart pounding as the figure moved closer. He didn't have to say anything anymore. His presence alone was enough to crush all hope. I knew that this time, there would be no running. No tricks. No doors that would lead me anywhere but back into this room, this nightmare. His hollow eyes bore into me, and I could feel the coldness seeping into my bones. Every part of my body screamed to move, to escape, but I couldn't. I was trapped. I couldn't even remember how I had gotten back here. Had I ever really left? "You're part of this place now," he said softly, his voice smooth but tinged with something ancient, something vile. "You can never leave. You're one of us. Forever." The words hit me like a slap, a harsh reality sinking in. There was no escaping. This wasn't just some random, messed up motel. This place, this room, it was alive. It had been feeding on me, pulling me back, over and over again, each time breaking me a little more. And now, I was part of it. "You shouldn't have come back," the figure said again, the words like poison in my veins. I felt my legs give way, my body collapsing to the floor. It wasn't just fear that had taken hold of me, it was a complete, consuming despair. There was nothing left to do, no way out. This was my end. I wanted to scream, but the sound died in my throat. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to fight with. I had already given everything I had just to survive this far. And now, as the figure moved closer, I realized that nothing I did would change the inevitable. The whispering grew louder, the voices in my head screaming at me, at each other. The walls seemed to pulse, closing in on me with every breath. I could feel the darkness in my chest, spreading like a disease, taking over my mind, my soul. I was becoming part of this place. But then, a thought flickered, like a tiny spark in the vast, suffocating dark. Fight back. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was like my body moved on its own, like it had already known what needed to be done. I staggered to my feet, not because I wanted to fight, but because I had no other choice. I faced the figure, my breath ragged, my eyes burning from the tears I hadn't even realized I had shed. He stopped. His smile grew wider, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes now, something like uncertainty. He didn't expect me to stand. To fight. But I did. I didn't know how or why, but I grabbed the key from my pocket. It was old, rusted, worn, the same key I had held in my hand when I first arrived. I knew what I had to do. The key was my only weapon. The whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of voices, but I focused on the figure in front of me. His face twisted, but I didn't look away. I could feel the pull of the darkness, but I couldn't let it take me. Not like this. I held the key up. The room seemed to tremble, and the figure's smile faltered. "You can't stop it," he hissed. "It's already begun." But I didn't care. I shoved the key into the lock of the door, the same door that had been there all along, and turned it with all the strength I had left. For a moment, nothing happened. The room was silent. The whispers stopped. And then, the door creaked open. It wasn't just a door anymore. It was a way out. It was the escape I had been searching for. I didn't hesitate. I ran toward the door, my feet stumbling, my body heavy with fear and exhaustion. The figure reached out toward me, but I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I was through the door and into the hallway, and then out into the cold night air, gasping